On today's episode, I want to talk about an entertainment story, and that is the story of the acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery. This was a long ordeal between Warner Bros., Netflix, and Paramount. And pretty much the way I want to talk about this is how Netflix lost the biggest bidding war in Hollywood history, and yet they are the ones that really won everything here. I mean everything. So we're talking about the acquisition of Warner Bros. Discovery. Paramount Skydance won, Netflix walked away, and if you've been following the headlines, the story is that Netflix got outmaneuvered, that David Ellison, the man running Paramount Skydance, pulled off some kind of miracle comeback, that Netflix blinked. I want to tell you why I think that story is completely backwards. Not slightly off, completely backwards. Part 1, the setup. Let's rewind, because to understand what just happened, you need to understand what this whole thing actually was. Warner Bros. Discovery, WBD, is one of the most iconic media companies in the world. We're talking HBO, Batman, CNN, Warner Bros. Film Studio, Cartoon Network, the whole thing. An absolute treasure chest of content that people have been watching for decades. Now, Warner Bros. Has had a rough few years. A lot of debt already on their books, the business of cable TV slowly dying, people are cutting the cord, moving to streaming, and those old cable channels are losing money every year. So Warner's under pressure. Its CEO, David Zaslav, starts quietly putting out feelers for a sale. And what starts as a quiet sale process turns into one of the most dramatic bidding wars Hollywood has ever seen. Part 2, the bidding war. Now here's where it gets interesting. Paramount Skydance is led by David Ellison. His father is Larry Ellison, the founder of Oracle, one of the richest people on the planet, and a close ally of the president. Ellison has a very well-funded family office behind him, political connections, and a lot of ambition. Paramount itself just did its own mega merger last year. David Ellison's Skydance bought Paramount Global for $8 billion. That deal has barely been digested when David Ellison starts showing up at Warner Bros. Discovery CEO Zaslav's house, literally knocking on the door, pitching a takeover. He gets turned down multiple times. So what does he do? He keeps raising his offer. First, $19 a share, then $22, then $23.50, all rejected. Meanwhile, Netflix, the biggest streaming company in the world, worth over $400 billion, quietly enters the room. And in December 2025, Warner's board shocks everyone by signing a deal with Netflix. Not with Paramount, with Netflix. Ellison is humiliated, on the outside, looking in. Part 3, the hostile bid. But here's where it gets wild. Ellison doesn't give up. He launches what's called a hostile tender offer, meaning he goes directly to Warner's shareholders, bypassing the board entirely, and says, I'll pay you $30 a share in cash. Don't listen to your board. And then he keeps raising it, $30, then $31. To put that in perspective, Ellison started this whole thing at $19 a share. He ended up at $31. That's a 63% increase from his opening number. And here's the kicker. The total deal, including Warner's existing debt, comes out to over $110 billion. The debt Ellison is taking on to do this is roughly $87 billion, at approximately 7 times what the combined company is expected to earn in a year before interest payments. 7 times. That is, and this is not hyperbole, the largest leverage buyout in the history of American business. A leverage buyout, by the way, is when you borrow a massive amount of money to buy a company and then use that company's own earnings to pay the debt back. It's a bit like buying a house by taking out a mortgage so big that every dollar the house earns in rent goes straight to the bank for the next decade. Part 4. Netflix walks away. Now, Netflix, when they see Ellison at $31, does something that shocked the entire industry. They said, no thanks, I'm good. They looked at $31 a share, higher than their own deal, and said the deal was, quote, no longer financially attractive. They walked away. Wall Street immediately declared Netflix the loser. Headlines called it an embarrassing retreat. Everyone was saying Netflix got played. I want to make the case that Netflix just ran one of the cleanest strategic plays in the history of corporate deal-making, not just the entertainment industry. Part 5. Why Netflix actually won. Here's what actually happened, and here's why I think it's brilliant. Netflix entered this bidding war knowing that the asset, Warner Bros., had real problems baked into it. Yes, there's HBO, which is incredible. Yes, there's the Warner Brothers film library, which is gold. But there's also CNN and TBS and TNT and a whole portfolio of cable channels that are bleeding subscribers and ad revenue every single quarter. Structurally dying businesses that nobody wants to own. Netflix's original deal with Warner Brothers, it only covered the studio and streaming assets, the good stuff. It explicitly left out the cable networks. Netflix never wanted those. They wanted HBO and the film library. Paramount's deal, Ellison took the whole thing. Every last struggling cable channel, every liability, every headache. So the first thing Netflix did was draw a line. We want the crown jewels, not the whole kingdom. But here's where it gets even better. The rope-a-dope. By entering the bidding war, Netflix forced Paramount to keep raising its offer. $25, $26, $30, $31. Every time Netflix stayed in the room, the price went up. Every time the price went up, Paramount had to borrow more money to cover the gap. Netflix essentially handed Ellison a bigger and bigger shovel to dig his own hole with. And then, when the hole wasn't deep enough, when Paramount was committed to $87 billion in debt at 7 times leverage, Netflix stepped back and said, actually, we're good. They didn't even leave empty-handed. Because of how the merger contract was structured, Paramount had to pay Warner's $2.8 billion breakup fee, the fee that Warner owed Netflix for walking away from their deal. Netflix participated in a bidding war, drove the price into the stratosphere, and collected a multi-billion-dollar exit fee on the way out. Part 6, the debt trap. But here's the really important part. The reason this wasn't just a clever short-term play, but actually sets Netflix up for years of wins going forward. Paramount just took on $87 billion in debt. To put that in terms that everyone can feel, that is a mortgage so big that almost every dollar the combined company makes for the foreseeable future goes straight to the bank. Not to content, not to competing with Netflix, to the bank. And here's the brutal reality of their situation. The cable channels they just bought, CNN, TBS, TNT, all of them are in what we call structural decline. That means they're not just having a bad year. The model itself is dying. Every year, more people cancel cable. Every year, ad revenue on those channels fall. It's not a cycle, it's a cliff. So Paramount has 2 problems happening at the same time. Enormous debt payments going out, declining revenue coming in. That combination in business, in your personal finances, wherever, has one inevitable outcome. You have to sell something. What would Paramount have to sell? Content, intellectual property, the stuff Netflix has always wanted. Batman, The Godfather, Casablanca, every HBO series ever made, SpongeBob, Top Gun, everything from both Paramount and Warner Bros. Combined under one roof. That is the most valuable content library on earth. And the company that owns it is going to be absolutely desperate to monetize it because they need cash to service that debt. Who has $400 billion in market cap, no meaningful debt, and has already proven it can turn licensed content into subscriber growth? Netflix. Part 7, the hoarding trap. Now, some people will push back and say, but wait, won't Paramount just hoard all that content for their own streaming platforms? Max and Paramount Plus are going to compete with Netflix directly, right? And look, that's what David Ellison says he wants to do. He talks about building a challenger to Netflix, creating scale, competing. But here's the thing. You can't afford to be a content hoarder when you're servicing $87 billion in debt on declining revenue. Think about it this way. You want to hold on to your crown jewels and use them to compete. But every month, you're not licensing those crown jewels. You're leaving money on the table while your debt keeps compounding. At some point, your lenders, the banks and investors who gave you that $87 billion, start asking uncomfortable questions about your coverage ratios, whether you can actually make your payments, whether you need to do something, anything to generate more cash. And the hoarding strategy gets worse every quarter, not better. Because while you're sitting on your IP, waiting to win the streaming war, Netflix is spending $17 billion a year on new content, improving its recommendation engine, growing in 190 countries, and getting stronger. You're fighting a war of attrition against someone who has more ammunition than you and no debt. The history of leveraged media companies trying to hold the line on content is not encouraging. After the Discovery-Warner Bros. Merger a few years ago, which also saddled Zaslav with huge debt, what did he actually do? He sold content to Netflix. He canceled finished films and TV shows for the tax write-offs. He licensed the library because reality forced his hand, regardless of what the strategy deck said. This will happen again, just at a much larger scale. Part 8. Putting it all together. The conventional narrative is Netflix lost, Paramount won. The reality is Netflix entered a bidding war, drove the price up dramatically, forced Paramount to take on the largest leverage buyout in American history, walked away with a massive breakup fee, preserved over $110 billion in capital, and now sits in the position of the most obvious and powerful buyer of content from a company that will be increasingly desperate to sell. They didn't just walk away from a bad deal. They engineered a situation where their competitor is now their future supplier on Netflix's terms, not Paramount's. And the longer Paramount waits to license, the more desperate Paramount becomes, and they will have to offer Netflix a cheaper price to license their content. Netflix doesn't even have to negotiate aggressively. Time is doing the negotiating for them. That, to me, is not losing a bidding war. That is winning the whole damn game. And look, there is a political dimension to this deal worth being aware of. The Ellison family ties to the current administration, to sovereign wealth fund financing, Kushner's involvement. But here's the thing. The financial outcome plays out the exact same way regardless. The debt math doesn't care about politics. If anything, the political connections just mean the deal closes faster, which only accelerates the timeline on everything I've just described. Okay, so as we come to a close, Netflix played this brilliantly. Paramount paid an extraordinary price, and over the next 2 to 3 years, I believe you're going to watch the debt pressure force exactly the kind of licensing deals that hand Netflix the content advantage it was going to have to pay $110 billion for anyway, except now they'll get it for a fraction of that from a seller who needs the money. So yes, saying that Netflix lost and Paramount won is not just an oversimplification. It's just ridiculous. Time will only tell, and we will definitely be watching this space. I'm Saurabh, this is Sound Speed Action, and as always, thank you for listening.